Good day. Welcome to the LPAC Weekly Report. My name's Nancy Spanos, and I'll be your host. With me in studio is Matthew Ogden from LPAC editorial staff, and across the Atlantic we have Lyndon LaRouche. And here we are 3 days before January 1st. So give us the scoop, Lynn.
Well, I think our agenda is now strategically defined. What we have is, first of all, we have a European crisis, which is the crucial point in the transatlantic region right now, where the most urgent economic and related type factors are on. And then we have the question in the United States of getting Obama out, because it's now clear that unless Obama is eliminated, civilization is not going to make it. It's that simple. When you take into account the weaknesses in Europe, and it's the role that Europe plays in the whole international scene, and the fact that if Obama's in office in the United States, the United States is not going to make it, which means the world won't make it. Now, at this point, since Obama has moved into a policy identical with that of Tony Blair's echo of Hitler's Tiergarten Fear program, but that the fact that Obama's fully on that program on an accelerated basis means that if we don't get Obama out, you can kiss the United States and civilization goodbye. And all those people who are saying you can't get Obama out, we have a clear 25th Amendment Section 4 provision for getting this lunatic out of office while we still have a country. Those people who are not moving to move Obama out are acting in a manner which is tantamount to the role of traitors. That has to be at a high level. This can no longer be tolerated, and there's no longer any room for being polite about this question. Either you get Obama out, or you lose civilization. That's your shot. Now, within that context, we have an agenda, I think, which is very important that we sort of stick to, rather than worrying about what might happen. Because at this point, I know there's no leadership presently in the United States in terms of a top leader, that I'm stuck in that position, because nothing is going to happen unless I lead it. And I saw this weekend where we were holding the shop together at this period where some people are away on vacation from the usual work, that it was a very fragile situation. And fortunately, because the people came through, especially in Purcellville, we maintained the operation successfully. And I jumped on the case in the way I did on Saturday and Sunday, with an understanding of what kind of a situation we're facing. And it has worked. Our part has worked. But now, in this position, we have to have not a response to what other people are doing. Our job is to have an agenda, our own agenda, which is providing a key theme of leadership for the nation. Don't kid yourself. We're not commentators on this situation. We're not also ran. We are the show. Bill Clinton has pulled out of it because it's gone beyond what his capabilities are at this time to provide leadership. He was playing a role of leadership earlier, but after the election, he pulled back from that. He's now doing other things, and he's still a useful person, but he's not providing leadership of the kind that's needed. I have to provide the leadership from my position. Otherwise, we're not going to make it, because I'm raising the issues as a spokesman which have to be raised. Now, so the first thing is getting Obama out. That's the agenda. And there's no apology. There are no excuses. There are no alternatives. What you've seen already in the T4 type legislation, which was, look, what he did. And we have some of the figures. What did Obama do? Obama, with this Berwick monster, pulled a stunt to try to ram through a T4 legislation piece by sneaking, by burying the fact that he was doing this. And he is on an issue which the president does not have the authority to make an initiative on this one. So he violated the intent of the Constitution by his action on this T4 type of legislation. And look at the little game he played to show you what a cheat this SOB is. He went to the 1233 deal. He buried it under a 12333. Now, 12333 refers to an old executive order. And their job was, as Berwick said, was to hide what they were up to. So they used 12333 and buried it under the label of 12333 to bury the track on this thing. To put this T4 kind of legislation, Hitler genocide legislation, illegally through by a president who does not have the proper constitutional authority to make such a decision, particularly on a piece of legislation which has been rejected by the Senate, and trying to enforce that now as law de facto from the White House. So you have a guy who's totally out of control. He has delusions of dictatorial powers. He has behaved with deceit to the entire institution of government in order to put this thing through. Now, getting this joker out is crucial, and people who are not thinking about getting this joker out are not patriots, and they're not leaders. And whatever they're doing, they're not coming up to the level required to be a leader of the United States in face of this world crisis, because they're not acting on the issue on which leadership is required. What they're doing is they're changing the subject. Well, we can't get this through at this time, therefore we'll do this, we've got to worry about this, we've got to consider this. And they are not sticking to the job. They're not sticking to the issue. The issue is you've got the entire world system is about to go into a dive, into a dark age. Europe is the primary area of vulnerability in terms of structure, because the European structure is much more shattered than that of the United States. In the United States, getting Obama out would be sufficient to proceed with steps which could save the United States and thus save Europe and thus save the world. Now, Obama out is number one, and anyone who hasn't got Obama out on the top of their program should shut up. They have nothing to say. They got something else? Shut up. Because until you get Obama out, you can't do anything that would actually save this nation from destruction. Now, whether the destruction starts in Europe or starts in the United States is a matter of indifference. Because if Europe goes under, while the United States is in this present kind of situation, the United States is going to go too. If the United States acts before Europe goes into a collapse phase, then we can hold the water on Europe as well as the United States by taking the action which we know we have to take. The first action is Obama out. Without Obama out as the top of the agenda, there's no solution for the civilization of this planet. Because if the United States goes, then Europe goes for sure. If we don't act in time, Europe's going to go and pull us down. If Europe and the United States go, then Asia goes. If Asia goes, South America and Africa and so forth all go. And you have the entire planet goes into a dark age. So there is no issue so important, so urgent, so significant, that getting Obama out is not the number one issue for civilization, for the human race as a whole at this time. And anybody who conceives of it as less is not on the job. They're either a coward or stupid. One of the two. All right, now the second thing is we've got to, at the same time we're pushing on the Obama question, the one thing we have to push actively is the GlassSteagall legislation. Because without Glass-Steagall, there's no chance of saving this nation. If we don't save this nation, we're not going to save Europe. And the whole planet goes. All right. The program of NWO, combined with the immediate action which only Glass-Steagall will let us do, which is to save the states. Otherwise, the states are going to cave in on us, and you're going to have panic, and somebody's going to go for dictatorship. It won't work, but they'll go for it anyway. Then we have to save the European system. If the United States takes leadership action, we can save the European system. Because there are nations in Europe who are so despondent about what's going on inside the Euro system that they will respond to any symptom in any direction. They're ready to be pushed into doing the right thing. And the push will have to come from the United States. It will not come from any place else. We've got to hope that Europe holds on until we get Obama out and can straighten out our emergency measures we have to take. Then we in Europe can be secured. If we're secured, then the planet can be secured. And that should be our first concern before anything else. Now, internally in the United States, in our own organization, what we have before us is we have to make sure that people understand the 6 nominees for this committee, this Congressional Pilot Committee, has to be a unified committee, not a committee of people who are each running their own operation. This is a committee like a decision-making committee which is stating a policy for the entire organization. In other words, it's not the individuals are each doing something good in their own area. It has to be a unified action under which the 6 are actually acting together as a committee to make and initiate decisions on behalf of the LPAC, which are going to be steering decisions made by the 6, like a committee forming a policy. And the policy they formulate has to be the policy of the LPAC operation. It has to be done that way. And then we have the supplements to NWOPA that have to be also considered beyond NWOPA and just bailing the states out from their collapse. Now, we have to have on the horizon, for beyond saving Europe, that is, save the United States first, then we can save Europe. Then we've got to consider the Eurasian problem, that is Russia and so forth. Now, right now, the BRIC is going down. The BRIC cannot be saved. It cannot be saved. Now, this is going to be a crisis for Russia because Russia got itself in too deep on the BRIC. Now, this is partly a result of the fact that the Pirates of the Caribbean took over the Russians. And you have most of the Russian assets are associated with the Pirates of the Caribbean. And actually, the Pirates of the Caribbean are a leading committee of the BRIC. And the BRIC is going under. So Russia is in a terrible situation. The situation can be managed, provided we manage the thing in the United States and also Europe, or key nations in Europe, cooperate. Then we can create measures of a credit system measures which will secure Russia despite the disintegration of the BRIC. So that problem can be solved. Africa, I think what we have to do, first of all, we've got to avoid this Sudan mess, which is being created by the Canadian-British crowd. And the key thing, I think, is the Trans-Aqua project, which is a small-time, NWOPA-type project, is what we should push as the emblematic thrust for Africa. It's absolutely crucial. And if you can say if we stabilize Sudan so it's not being destroyed, then the Trans-Aqua project, in addition to what Sudan is already doing in terms of trying to build up its agricultural potential and so forth, will be enough to get Africa started. And that's what and of course then South America in this whole process comes in with the way we indicated, with the Darien Gap orientation. And that gives us a package, an agenda, which I would suggest is what we ought to be thinking about and using as a guide to our policy, with the understanding that we're now in a position where I personally, with all the improbabilities that are in place, I'm the one who's in this catbird seat on providing leadership for the United States at this time, because everybody else is either incompetent or is bad. So we've got. And if we can get this thing started, then you will find that people who are now running away from responsibilities because they are frightened, it's beyond their capabilities, will come back in and begin to play leadership roles, and we'll get our act together. But I think this agenda is what's key for us right now.
Right. And the time is very short, as you've emphasized in a number of statements in the recent days, that we're looking at the European crisis that you indicated might be breaking out immediately, is really hanging by a thread, right? And it's totally connected with the fact that the Fed here seems to be the major source of money into that, which means a blowback is immediate if this thing blows, as much as, 3-4 days from now.
Yeah, well, what you've got is a situation, if you go to a GlassSteagall approach, at the same time with a fixed exchange rate system in mind, as the cooperation among nations. We simply, with the GlassSteagall approach, we will wipe out most of these debts which are associated with Europe and the United States, because we just class them as not in the system.
Derivatives and all that kind of garbage, right?
Yeah, right. It's all gone. It's all stuck over there, and it's on its own. That means that the federal government's power of generating credit, and similarly would be the case for Europe after we've done our job, would mean that we now have the ability to generate credit under a GlassSteagall umbrella to, number one, save the states, which will mean we'll create stability again inside the United States by getting stability back in the states. And it means we can start then immediately on the NWO project and the ancillary projects which are necessary to support NWO. Now, this will give us, as I say before, the 4 million to 6 million jobs, which include very high technology jobs, in the greatest project that mankind has ever undertaken so far. So therefore, we will then have for the United States a clear perspective on saving the United States and leading the world. Once we do the NWO start, then we go immediately into the Siberian operation. And the Siberian operation, which will involve Europe, China, everybody else involved, because it's a question of getting the mineral resources for helping Asia, the southern part of Asia, is a crucial element there. China will stabilize automatically under these conditions. It's in a very strong position. India will stabilize. So you will have a Eurasian perspective with the United States involved through the connection to an NWO project for scientific and other things, and we'll have a go for the planet.
Well, on the breakdown crisis, I think it's good to recognize and just to underscore that it's not a coincidence that Obama is renewing his drive for this Hitler T4 program at exactly the same time that you have this phase of the breakdown crisis, because it was under the exact same conditions that Adolf Hitler initiated his death camp policy. Whenever you accept, I think it gets at the root of the whole question of economic value, because whenever you accept a standard of economic value where money is your absolute standard of value, you're on the slippery slope towards killing people in order to honor these debts which have no intrinsic economic value in and of themselves.
Precisely.
Right. And what's really shocking, really, and people should take it much more to heart. I mean, how many times have you written about the shift that happened at FDR's death with Truman taking over and a whole cultural change? Well, I was looking back today in light of what Obama's doing with this, which we warned about, time and time again. You starting in the spring of 2009, in the webcast of April with Obama personally, and immediately around the health care bill in particular, the death care bill, the T4 bill in particular. But looking at that and looking at the warning that one of the leading psychiatrists at the Nuremberg doctor trials gave in the late 1940s, the Truman era, 1949. And he said at that point that the shift was already happening toward looking at people as useful commodities. And once they were no longer useful and they could no longer, he said precisely what these guys are saying now. If you can't rehabilitate people to go back to work or to do something useful for us, then you shouldn't expend your resources on them because they're incurable. And then that takes you to the point which Hitler said in 1939, which is, well, if they're going to be incurable, and we've figured it out through a panel of experts, well, then they should have a right to have a mercy death. We should be able to kill them. And that's precisely what, but the shift was seen in 1949. And the shift has not been reversed because the Kennedy era ended with a bang, right, from the British. And the leadership has been stuck to the core around you and some collaborators, dwindling number, as you point out, in this entire period. But we now, push has really come to shove in terms of that reemergence of fascism in the most powerful nation of the world. So it's on the United States, fascism or your solution.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And we have to act in that way at this time. There's no other chance. There's no other chance.
Well, I think seeing the fight against Obama's T4 policy and the fight for Glass-Steagall as really one and the same issue, that's necessary because it's not just two issues that we're fighting on. These are the polar opposites: a T4 death camp policy versus a Glass-Steagall, because of this question of economic value. And if you look at it, at the same time Hitler was consolidating his dictatorship in the interest of Schacht and the London bankers, Franklin Roosevelt was consolidating the Glass-Steagall law and saying, we are not going to honor these, we're not going to kill our people in order to honor these fictitious debts. And so that's, I think, the way that we have to see the unity in this war.
Right. Right.
Quite agree. That's what we are. And it's a very exciting time, and not exciting in the sense of fun, but exciting in the sense that that's the way it is.
Right.
I think, of de Gaulle and his writings on his World War II experience from the time that France had fallen, and he was crawling inch by inch back, and this continued up through the time that Kennedy was killed. And when Kennedy was killed, then de Gaulle's position was hopeless. The German situation was essentially hopeless. And then we went into this process. And we're now trying to reverse what de Gaulle and Roosevelt were separately doing, but they eventually came back to a converging view, because de Gaulle was entangled with loyalty to France, and France was already, a majority of the French were fascists. The resistance story in France is a story in itself. And, where does fascism come from? It comes from Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte was the launching of fascism. Napoleon III, or sometimes used Turd, again, is a better term, was again the same thing. And what was done by Germany making a mistake, which was not Bismarck's fault, but in continuing the war against France after Napoleon III was out, was a great mistake on the part of Germany, because they played into the British hands by continuing this quarrel with France, so France became a bitter enemy of Germany, and thus, with its already established fascist tendencies in the French population, was ready to join the British, particularly after the assassination of Sadi Carnot, the president, was ready to join the British in an attack on Germany. So Germany's failure to listen to Bismarck on the war policy was a tragic mistake, which led to the enraging of an already fascistly teeming France under Napoleon III, as well as Napoleon I beforehand. And they made that mistake. And, you think about it and you say, of all the wars that have been fought in recent time, World War I was a mistake, a terrible mistake. World War II was a necessity, especially when the United States got in on it. Every war after that, apart from a few minor skirmishes, which are very short in duration, every military operation of the United States of any large scale has been a tragic mistake since that time. And it's by the aid of these tragic mistakes that we lost the perspective of nation building. The drama became, who is the enemy? And people are not your enemy. It's a wrong political policy that's the enemy. And you have to avoid war, like you have this thing of the British are trying to organize with some others. They're trying to organize a Korean war, a new Korean war, which will inevitably engage China. So the British are using some kind of an operation in North Korea, which they control, to destabilize the situation in Korea, but the objective is to force China into participation in that war. The purpose of that operation by the British is the British intention to destroy China. And if that goes on, you can forget the world. And these are the kinds of issues which we have to bring in. We have to actually provide now that we've come to this mess we're in now, to look at some of the things that got us into this mess. Here we had a United States which was formed. It had a great number of allies. The League for Armed Neutrality, the King of Spain, France, were the powers which principally made possible the success of the United States, its victory in establishing the Republic. How was that destroyed? The British made operations, including the Napoleonic Wars, which they ran. Napoleon was a dumb stooge, a fascist stooge, who had been in one war on behalf of his first wife, who was tied to the Turkish cause against the Austrians. So he got a little messed up on that little operation he ran. He came back to France, dumped his wife, who had been a pro-Turkish orientation, and got himself an Austrian Habsburg wife. And Napoleon, from that point on, became a Habsburg asset, an asset of the British and Habsburgs, who were running a new 7 Years' War in Europe and virtually destroyed Europe. A Europe which collectively united in the early 1780s, had secured a new world order. That world order was destroyed because people didn't pay attention to business and got themselves trapped into a process that led into the 1790-89 and then led into this mess where Europe was destroyed through what became the Napoleonic Wars. Then Napoleon was rid of that. But Europe then crawled back. And under Bismarck's influence, on the basis of another war, the United States' Civil War victory, we started again with 1876 with the Philadelphia Convention. Again, we launched the process. Bismarck led the process. People in Russia led the process again. We're on the road to that. 1890, they dumped Bismarck. The British Empire does it, the British monarchy. Then we go in, from that point on, we're on the road into World War I, with the assassination of another president of ours, McKinley, whose assassination made possible World War I. Then World War II didn't work out the way the British had intended, but they corrected that error by getting Truman and doing things to destroy the world after Roosevelt's death. And at the time, the point is, we have to learn this lesson. The world has to learn these lessons. There are such things as justified warfare. But most of the wars that have been fought have not been justified. And warfare, unjustified warfare, which has been most warfare, has been used to induce nations to destroy themselves when they're on the right course or searching for the right course. And that's the great lesson we have to get. If we can win this thing, save the United States, save Europe, save this planet from what the British intend, we've got to embed in the population and the leadership of nations an understanding of what the mistakes have been. These mistakes and typical other mistakes like it. So humanity does not make these mistakes again. Here we are about to lose civilization. We're on the verge of losing civilization this year, this new year. It's time we have to learn the lesson. We have to fix this thing now. We have to save civilization now. But we have to change our ways so that this does not happen another time.
Right. And what we have as an asset here is in the face even of the demoralization of the U.S. population which maybe thought for a moment they did something by lashing out in the last election, but actually simply have fallen into another trap, and that we're in this potential lock between the fascist Obama and the fascist Rand Paul Republicans. Is, our job has to be to exert that leadership that you asserted at the beginning, that you represent, that the candidates committee represents, with not only getting the population to kick ass with the Congress, but we're in effect kicking ass at the population, saying, you're sitting back, you want to be one of our colleagues, Phil, was telling me yesterday, Lynn, that he's noticed that the worse the physical conditions of life get for the population, the more hysterically they cling to these holiday fantasies of saying, I don't want to deal with this, don't bother me with the fact that we have to launch this battle right now, right, as opposed to waiting until conditions might be right or I might feel like it later on. It's our job to both inspire and jolt the population into a situation where they know that it's a matter of days, it's a matter of weeks, that their action makes every difference in the world. Perhaps you have some response to the candidacies or if Lynn has a response to this question of urgency.
Well, we certainly are on a war footing with the candidates committee. What we've done just over the past few days in this in-between week, people might have seen that Diane Sayer had a very strong statement on the website yesterday. She's a candidate in New Jersey, part of the Committee of Six. And also today, Dave Christie and Bill Roberts, the two other new candidates, will have statements on the website also. And, one thing we've been discussing is you really, despite the kind of demoralization that you see in the aftermath of the election, there's still something lurking beneath the surface, which we were able to engage during the last election cycle, and we just have to bring it back up to the top. And with this Obama death camp policy thing, it's very explosive, or in potential at least. We were remembering that Rachel Brown, in her famous debate with Barney Frank on television, she made a very strong point. She said, what has to be said is we will not let one human life be lost for the purpose of balancing a budget. And that was the theme of her entire campaign, really, because the way she launched her campaign in the first place was at that famous August town hall meeting where she stood up and challenged Barney Frank, saying, why are you supporting a Nazi healthcare policy? Why are you supporting Obama's T4 policy? So that's the identity of these campaigns. And I think the fact that we're on the aggressive warpath with it will have a very strong effect for people.
That's what you do in war.
Right. As an old warrior, you can say that.
Yeah.
Well, do you have that you want to add, Lynn, or do you think the message has been delivered here?
I think the point is having the idea. We need, with it, the concept, we have an agenda.
Right.
And this agenda, we're operating in a vacuum, otherwise, where there is no other leadership that is a central leadership for the United States except what I'm doing at this point. It doesn't exist. Bill is fighting a different fight now. He was playing a significant role as an ex-president in providing appropriate leadership and influencing people who should have been leaders. There's still people out there who are qualified leaders. Bill is still a qualified leader under the appropriate conditions. I think this much is something is one thing too much to him to handle at this time. And it is more my kind of business than the thing he's used to. So I'm playing this role. And it may seem absurd to some people that I'm playing this role but when you think about my background, well, I'm the most experienced leader for this kind of fight that the United States has. So I will just do that now. And we'll worry about what happens next after we solve this problem. We'll see who comes along to pick up the threads after that. I think we'll have to breed some of them now. We have them already in the breeding stock. We'll just have to get them to emerge as bred for battle.
Okay. So do you have more? No?
I think that pretty much covers it.
I think that pretty much covers it. And we will wish you a happy anniversary.
It'll be a happy anniversary. All my anniversaries are happy.
And we will.
That's one thing that's good. That's my great success.
And we will see you next week.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Be good. Have fun.
Thanks.